So I didn't actually plan to play or review this game. There were a few different reasons behind that. For one, Mortal Kombat has never been a franchise I was really passionate about. Also, there was some political stuff going on that I'm not a very big fan of, and some other things as well. But I was actually given the game by someone who really wanted me to cover it, as well as the fact that I prefer to have played the games that I talk about. And since I already criticized certain aspects of Mortal Kombat 11, it's important for me to be able to back that up. With that said, here we are with a review of Mortal Kombat 11. I'm going to break this review apart into two different segments, and the first segment is going to be about politics. Now, I know full well that many players either don't care about politics or have a drastically different set of beliefs than I do. So I'm going to add a timestamp to the description of the video, which will take you straight past the political discussion and right to the part focused specifically on gameplay. For those of you still watching, though, this game went full fucking woke. Here's the thing, some people like when games get woke. I'm not one of those people, but they certainly exist. The issue is that I would argue the core audience for Mortal Kombat as a franchise are not those people, given that the game has been marketed and sold a certain way for longer than a decade. So the sudden pivot based on Western political drama is unexpected and largely ill-received. The tagline of "Get Woke, Go Broke" is a phrase thrown around a lot in the gaming industry nowadays. In a quite literal sense, it is, I guess, fairly true. Games that aggressively promote partisan politics perform worse because they cut down on their broader audience appeal. In a more literal sense, we can see an example like the cafe in Melbourne, in Australia. The vegan cafe, named Handsome Her, charged an 18% man tax, seated women first, among other things, and has now gone out of business because, go figure, enforcing practices that either antagonize or fail to appeal to what is essentially half of your potential buyer's market, surprise, surprise, it doesn't fucking work very well. The changes and decisions within Mortal Kombat 11 are not on par with charging 18% more just for being a man. Far from it, in fact. When enforcing policies like that at a dining establishment, you lose a large chunk of female patronage as well, because who wants to go as a mixed gender group of friends to a place where the guys get charged 18% more? That's not a small percentage. It also eliminates a large batch of heterosexual couples for the exact same reason. And it underlines my main point, which is that oftentimes businesses, companies, or even games that get woke are just trying to make a statement with no consideration for how it impacts their product, their reputation, or their future. Mortal Kombat 11, or more specifically, a small group of decision makers in control of the franchise right now, just want to make a statement. And this statement is blatantly obvious in a number of different areas. During the campaign, there are dialogue lines that appear to be thinly veiled jabs at Donald Trump. There is a campaign ending, which makes very little sense in the world of Mortal Kombat, but tackles the idea of ignoring Raiden's warnings about interfering with the timeline and changing history to remove slavery. There is literally a line in that one reading, "I'm not waiting centuries for people to get woke." And there is this now well-known decision by NetherRealm to intentionally desexualize all female characters and remove the legacy costumes that have been well-known within the franchise for many years. Individually, all of these things might not really be worth talking about, but in conjunction, they really do come together to form a game that has very strong political undertones that do not increase its value to the customer, but rather subtract from it. Hear me out on this. Removing legacy costumes means less cosmetic items. Not only that, but the concept of battle damage from previous Mortal Kombat games that showed outfits getting ripped and torn is now replaced with simple bloodstains. It's not a large concern, far from it, but there are undeniable areas in which this newfound political message has impacted the game's content. Worse yet, the justification is that women would not enter combat scantily clad in bikinis or other revealing outfits, and yet, multiple female characters in the game wear high heels into a fight to the death. The logic here is non-existent, and the final straw to me is the fact that they cannot even be honest about their agenda. The developers pretend that this game is augmented because of realism, and that those complaining are prejudicial or whatever, but that is a hollow and pathetically articulated deflection away from their true motivation. Additionally, and on a bit of a side note right now, Warner Brothers has been abusing the copyright system on YouTube. They are deliberately targeting videos that highlight these exact same concerns, and I avoided that issue in my previous segment, which discussed the outfit removal and why it signifies a broader issue. But I can't very well do the same here, because a review without showing the game I am talking about is pretty worthless. So if this video gets struck down, just know that it is Warner Brothers abusing the YouTube copyright claims program in an illegal way, as an attempt to silence and remove articulate, unlike their developers, criticism of the product. Mortal Kombat 11 has blatant political motivations. For some, that's a positive, for others, a negative, and for a still larger group, it means nothing at all, honestly. But anyone going into the game that supports the current United States president, get ready for his slogan to be used as a rallying cry for the villains, or for the once iconic outfits of specifically the female fighters to be completely different with total coverage and desexualization, as well as various other lines and quips aimed at establishing a very firm, woke as hell political stance. That's enough of the politics, though. Now for the gameplay. At its core, Mortal Kombat is still Mortal Kombat. I'm not very good at some of the finishers, but they are back with all of their previous glory. The death blows have some great animations, there are a bunch of different alternate versions, and overall it's one of the standard components to the Mortal Kombat franchise that we've come to know and expect. There is very little to say about combat flow and polish. Most of what I can talk about has already been true for years in the latest versions. The characters have a strong sense of identity, they play in unique ways, and it is very fun to test them all out, finding which combos you like, dislike, or want to utilize most frequently. The one exception to this is that if you were a fan of any legacy costumes for the female characters, as we discussed previously, those are pretty much all gone. There is a system for slotting a set number of combos out of a broader selection for each different character. I myself ended up really enjoying Baraka with his War Banner combos, and there is some versatility there to not just find the character you enjoy, but also slot the combos that best fit your playstyle. On top of that, there is a cosmetic system for various different pieces of gear, and those gear pieces have augmentation slots. Augmentations are a reward you have to grind for, and there are a bunch of different types to them. The problem is, gear has a lower number of augmentation slots and affinities than there are overall types, so it becomes a really grindy sort of hassle to get good augmentations into cool looking items. Not always, but sometimes. Augmentations also have stat bonuses, or currency earning boosts as their affixes. As far as I can tell, anything that raises damage or gives a real gameplay performance boost does not work in PvP, so that's good. But it's a really confusing system at first, and it is extremely grindy. The best way I've found to earn augmentations, and most rewards for that matter, is the Towers of Time. The Towers of Time are actually, for the most part, quite fun, and this is so far where I've spent a large chunk of my playtime. You essentially progress through different levels up to a final fight, and gain rewards based on which tower you choose to attempt. You can also use various consumables to let you summon allies, or use some interesting abilities over the course of any given fight, and some of them are really fun. But even with these abilities and special boosts, sometimes these tower floors can be unbelievably difficult. You can skip the floors that are too hard with a limited number of tokens, and I'm pretty sure at some point these tokens will be sold as microtransactions, but right now, as I play the game, they aren't, at least not that I could find. So take that for what you will. It seems like an obvious monetization tactic to spike profits, but overall the towers are mostly interesting and often pretty fun. You can watch AIs fight and even speed up the fights as well. This is a weird one, while also getting rewarded for it. And this is a really strange system, but I'll tie it back in later on because it might be the final piece of the puzzle to understand why the game is built the way it is. Then there is the Crypt. The Crypt is a giant loot box arena. There is a forge where you can recombine items into different items, but that part is super confusing as well because the recipes are hard to discover and it doesn't consume the items you place in the forge, just the currency you pay to try the recipe. It's honestly just a gimmick. There are multiple types of currency to open chests. There is regular coin and then there's hearts, which are from brutalities and executions. The hearts open better chests and the coins open regular chests, all of which are just loot boxes. And some chests have set rewards, others are random. I couldn't really figure out all of this. Again, it's really confusing. There are also a bunch of locked things, and I have no idea what the fuck half of these are. So the Crypt is kind of cool, I guess. It's more interesting than a simple loot box screen, but if we're being honest, it's just a creative way of feeding you those loot boxes while you run around a little island. What it comes down to is that Mortal Kombat 11 basically has a mobile game economy and monetization model. You have tokens to skip difficult fights, tokens in the store for easy executions that are one-time use instead of just letting people toggle easy executions in a menu somewhere. You have currency for forging things, a massive grind to level up gear and re-roll that gear to slot the augmentations, which are themselves a pretty hefty grind. You can go into the loot box crypt and gamble a bit to get some of the grindy items, but even then, it's a really convoluted system that does nothing but leave the player feeling very unhappy. At least me personally, that's how it was. Now, remember that AI fight watching mechanic? That is the final piece that makes me say, yeah, this is essentially mobile game monetization. It seemingly only exists as an idle farming method. As you speed up the fights, you get rewards like coins and items, and you can change the character's stat allocation, such as offensive or defensive emphasis with a point cap total. It's a sort of cool system, I guess, but it really just ends up being a way to farm money and items without any effort, which resembles the systems used by a lot of different mobile games. On top of that, though you can't buy very much in the premium store right now at this very moment, you will certainly be able to buy more later on. I don't see them going any other way with it. And that begs an entirely separate question of how they will treat balancing once they sell those items and boosts. For instance, with the Towers of Time, they could easily just make every 5th floor unbelievably hard and force you to buy the skips. It's not that uncommon for games to do shit like that nowadays, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens here. The grind is just tedious, annoying, convoluted, and badly done. The gameplay is fun. Individual matches are very fun. Ranked leagues will be available soon, which is a very desirable attribute for a fighting game. And overall, I do enjoy the game when I'm actually playing. But there are certainly some things holding it back. Between the unnecessary political stance, the overly grindy economy, and the confusing gear system, it subtracts a great deal from what the game could and should have been. But if you can overlook those things, it's a great fighting game with a lot to offer. The technical polish is exquisite, at least for me it was. No crashing, no disconnects, no bugs, glitches, or exploits. Clean gameplay that is refreshing in an industry where unfinished garbage is released all too often. One thing though, the finishers and death blows are really cool and fun most of the time. If you're winning, they feel great, or when you use them to turn the tides of battle. But if you're losing and you have to watch 15 seconds of the enemy just cinematically shitting on you, they suck and they are fucking miserable. I saw a screenshot, and that's the only reason I'm mentioning all of this, of a review complaining about how they break up the flow of battle and weren't very good. And sometimes it does feel that way, but that's just part of what it is to play Mortal Kombat, because when you are the one who gets 10 seconds of just brutally eviscerating someone, it's the other side of that exact coin. Mortal Kombat kind of has this atmosphere to it that for you to have fun, they need to suffer, and vice versa. Some players enjoy that, others don't. In the end, it's a good game that is a little bit buried by the garbage. The core is as good as it has always been, but the surrounding stuff, the politics, the grind, the convoluted gear, currency, and customization, it's all pretty bad. For someone looking to play the game here and there with friends, it's amazing. But for those trying to maximize the game and get everything it has to offer, you are probably going to hate a lot of the systems. If I had to give it a number rating, it would be like a 6, I guess. A 6 out of 10. But that 6 is totally comprised of actual gameplay, so it's a pretty meaningful 6. If you care more about the long-standing atmosphere, lore, and identity of Mortal Kombat as a franchise, then it's probably lower because of their new contemporary political bent. But if you actually support the use of corporate platforms to push partisan ideologies, specifically this one, then hell, maybe it's an 8 or a 9 for you. At this point, everything is so subjective anyways nowadays, what does it really matter? That's it though. Solid game, but unfortunately buried under some extra nonsense. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. We have various different communities, merch, and some other stuff as well, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. Thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.